Welcome to Local Matters, the official Laverne podcast. I'm Anne Smith, Public Information Officer for the City of Laverne. Today I have with me City Planner Bo Logan. Bo has been working with the city since 2017. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So today we're going to talk about Planning Commission, which is one of our many boards and committees that we have, but it's one that really has a big effect on the day-to-day operations and really the overall plan for the city, right?
It does. So any type of development, whether it's commercial, residential, industrial, anything that involves construction or changing the use of property, all the way down to sometimes home additions or people that want to put in pools in their yard, all that comes through planning. The smaller residential stuff may not come to the full Planning Commission, but it comes through the planning office.
Okay. So go into detail about the Planning Commission itself and what the commission does for our city.
Okay, so this Planning Commission has 7 members. The legislation that was passed by the state, probably in the 30s and 40s, that allows cities and towns to zone. So the state had to actually have, they call it enabling legislation. So that legislation is what even allows Nashville or Murfreesboro or Laverne to have the power to zone. So that's probably one of the biggest things that this Planning Commission does.
Is zoning for the city.
That same legislation sort of spells out like how many members you can have. So I believe for a municipal planning commission it's between 5 and 13. So we have 7. A lot of cities our size have 7 or 9 members.
And then, of course, one of them is the mayor and one of them is a selected alderman.
One's the mayor and one has to be an elected official. So here, we call them aldermen, so there has to be, or alderwomen. So there has to be one elected alderman or alderwoman that sits on the board. So currently it's Carol Haas. And when Mr. Coates was in the BOMA role, he was the official that served for BOMA. So it can change with the election cycles anyway. So yeah, our mayor likes to be involved directly and be there for the meetings, and that's good for the city too.
So what is the Planning Commission? I mean, I know you said they focus a lot on zoning, but what does that mean? What does zoning mean for citizens who won't necessarily know what an R3 is or what a C2 is?
Yeah. So zoning is the classification, and there's a map that goes along with this, which we call the zoning map. So that classification is given to every piece of property in the city. There's tens of thousands of parcels. We call a piece of land a parcel. So Laverne probably has 15,000 parcels. I'm gonna say in that neighborhood. It may be 14 or 16, but somewhere in there. And so each parcel is zoned, and that gives the owner certain rights. So if you're zoned residential, one of those rights that's pretty obvious is that you have the right to build a dwelling or a house and live on that property. Commercial zoning, which is most of Murfreesboro Road, I think all of Murfreesboro Road except a tiny part is commercial. And Waldron Road, you think about restaurants, where Walmart's located, it's a Walmart zone commercial. So that gives commercial property owners certain uses that are allowed. The fancy term is called allowed by right. So allowed by right just means that if you want to build a house in an R1, it doesn't require a meeting necessarily with me. If say that you had one piece of land and you owned an acre, I don't have to investigate or research it and give an opinion from the planning department on that house. So it's a use by right that R1 allows. So besides R1, we have R2, which is just a smaller lot. So R1 minimum size is 15,000 square feet, which is a third of an acre. So think R1's a third of an acre, and R2 goes down to 10,000 square feet. which is roughly a quarter of an acre. And then after R1 and 2, we have R3, which is all the multifamily. So condos, townhouses, apartments would be R3. And then there is an R4 designation, which is for mobile home parks. So, and we have a few of those around town. So that'd be R4 zoning. And that covers R1, 2, 3, and 4 covers the residential. And so C2 is what's most common on Murfreesboro and Waldron. And on the zoning map, it's a red color. So Walmart's zone C2, a lot of like McDonald's, Burger King, those types of establishments are C2. And then there is the Kroger Shopping Center, there is a C4 district that is currently called the Shopping Center District. There's not a lot of it on the map. It's Kroger and a couple out parcels. I think that Valvoline is still C4. So it's not, most of Mercer Road is C2, but the C4 is a different one, a different designation that was for larger shopping centers. The Planet Fitness, actually, I just saw that one, which used to be, I believe, a Food Line, but that's C4 as well. So, yeah.
And then we have industrial as well, which is a good part of the interstate area.
Probably the one closest to City Hall is the Co-op, the largest industrial zoning. And, of course, they've been in here recently with an expansion, and they're going to be building several buildings on that site. But, yeah, that's industrial. There's so many products that move through Laverne. I didn't know until I started working here just how much goes through this city, just from a distribution standpoint. So you've got, some of the ones that we know about, but there's like AutoZone, the Saks, Fifth Avenue, then there's Cardinal Health, and
Bridgestone, Firestone.
Yeah, there's just, then they built the Amazon facility after I got here in 2017. I think it opened in about 2019, but and that's just scratching the surface, really, when you think about it.
That's an understatement.
There's so much distribution warehouse, and it's important for the whole Nashville region. So Laverne's pretty integral part of that.
What are the most common requests that the Planning Commission will see on their agendas?
Yeah, okay, so one, almost goes without saying, would be new neighborhoods. So new subdivisions. We've had a lot of those over the last several years. Of course, I guess some of the bigger ones are Carruthers Crossing, which is on Carruthers Road, and then Arbor Ridge, which is on Waldron, south of the interstate. So those are two large developments. Of course, then you've got Lake Forest on this north side of town, and Lake Forest is really mainly developed out. There's been some homes built in the last few years, but it's been also a lot of townhomes in Lake Forest. So, yeah, new residential, which is new subdivisions, and new townhomes. I'm trying to think, as far as actual apartments, I think there's only been one development that was approved, and that's Jackson Station on Old Nashville Highway, which just opened in the last about month and a half. There's been other developers that desired apartments, but for whatever reasons, those either the rezoning didn't go through, or there was some infrastructure issue that the developer wasn't prepared for. There's a lot of reasons that things start out at planning and then they either defer or they get withdrawn. But yeah, we've had the one apartment complex and a few, maybe more than a few, townhome developments. This month, Blair Ridge is at the Planning Commission. They were there in January, and they'll be there again in February. And that's on Blair Road, and that's about 120 townhomes on Blair Road, so it's not far from the end of Sam Ridley Parkway, but on the Laverne side. So yeah, we do have a large townhome development coming through. So there's still a lot of residential. It'd be interesting to see over the last 5 years if residential and industrial requests are basically tied, because they might be. There was a lot more space that was undeveloped in 2017 when I got here. It's amazing what has been developed. The Park 24 area, for instance, which is, so I just mentioned Blair Ridge, so right beside it is High Point 24, and that development is by a company named Panatone. They're out of California. They build a lot in Middle Tennessee, but I think they put in 1,050,000, so just over 1 million square feet of distribution warehouse space. So you can see if you're on I-24 or even across at BJ's, you can see that building that sits close to the interstate. So that was all just vacant trees, forested land, not long ago.
I remember when they started working on that. It feels like it was.
Goodness.
It feels it was 6 months ago.
Yeah, and then I mentioned Amazon earlier, but the Amazon land was not developed, and then Park 24, which is the IC headquarters. All of the Park 24 area was the first project at the end of 17. It would have been in the fall that I've worked on, and people that are listening may remember Mason Road. To me, looked like, it could have been in Gatlinburg. Mason Road, I went up there that first fall, and I drove it, and I was like, is this still Laverne? And it didn't take long because, Laverne's a hot place to develop, so they didn't, I guess it was the next spring they introduced the IC headquarters in Park 24, but yeah, we probably have had about an equal amount of industrial requests when you compare housing and industrial. And of course, the big news this last year has been BJ's, so that's been really great for the city, and it's brought more shopping opportunities and a chance for people to shop more local and not have to drive to a wholesale club. So yeah, BJ's had a great impact on the city. It's a big asset, so it's neat to drive by BJ's and see that. That was another area that was just. It was sitting empty. They'd used it. They'd quarried rock out to help, build I-24 years ago, and it just sat vacant. So, yeah, I can go down just about any road. It seems like I can see stuff that
wasn't there before.
Just 5 or 6 years ago was just, either a field or, a forest or something. But, yeah, it's and I know it's happening in a lot of areas in Middle Tennessee, but, yeah, it's been really strong growth in Laverne.
So when someone comes to Planning Commission and they present you with a site plan or a land use plan or whatever they're presenting to Planning Commission, is there something that the Planning Commission is looking for before they give, because I know they give favorable and unfavorable recommendations to the board.
They do.
So what are they looking for with site plans? And
that's a really good question. So on Murfreesboro, on Waldron, there's an architectural overlay district. So the Planning Commission is they're very serious about the overlay, and they take it seriously. And for those projects that come in with a site plan that are in the overlay, there's a whole other set of rules. There's certain materials they can't use on the site, and materials that can't be on the building. There's an 80% brick requirement on the front of every new building that's built, and then a 50% on the sides.
And that's for keeping things looking cohesive
there
throughout the city. And
yeah, and it really makes the curb appeal of the city look a lot better, and aesthetically it improves the look of our main highways. There's a landscaping component, of course. Every site, even if it's not, say, on Murfreesboro or Waldron, every site plan has to put in landscaping, but the landscaping requirement really steps up in the overlay. A lot more trees required, a lot more plantings, and that sort of thing. And landscaping really goes a long way toward making everything look better. It's amazing just what a few trees can do versus a site that's maybe 20 or 30 years old that doesn't have any trees. So that's part of the overlay. So there's the exterior requirements. The ordinance calls for brick, stone, or masonry. So there are some masonry products that are also allowed. One of them is used at the Thorntons. I just thought of that. It's kind of worth bringing up. So the Thorntons, if you drive by or even if you walk up and go in the building, if you just look at their walls, you think, oh, this is a brick building. It's kind of related to brick in that it's masonry, but it's a product called Nichiha, and it is a masonry product, and it's very durable. It's made with concrete. It's heavy, and then they can design the pattern on the outside of it to mimic any color or brick formation that you would want. So
it's not real brick.
It's not what you think of like traditional brick, like each brick being laid by a mason or some skilled laborer. It's put up in panels, but again, it's got a really nice look, and I don't think we've seen it again, but I expect to see it again at some point. But Thornton's was the first user that wanted to put that up. But it looks like a great product. I know throughout the country, I've seen some Walgreens that are using it and have been for a while. So it makes sense. I mean, it's kind of a meet in the middle product because paying the labor to lay each individual brick, it's extremely costly. And then there's the price of the brick itself, which is costly. So if you can get a product that looks, you almost from the street, you can't tell the difference. So it's helping them get the building up faster. It's less expensive, but it's still giving the same benefit. So, yeah, it's fun to work with the different products and see because technology is changing, and like that product didn't exist 10 years ago. So it's neat to see what they come up with to do that. So, yeah, you mentioned favorable, unfavorable.
Yeah, that was
okay. So
next.
That, and again, all this comes from state laws from years ago, but on a rezoning, the rezoning by state law has to go to the legislative body after the planning commission. So BOMA is the final decision maker on all rezoning. So that recommendation is just positive or negative from the planning commission. So they're not actually approving it.
Yeah, it's essentially the planning commission saying, we think this would do well.
Exactly.
They met the punch list. They did all the things that we requested of them, and we think it would be a benefit to the city. Or vice versa.
Yeah.
They didn't meet the punch list, or I guess maybe that would prevent them from even going to BOMA. But,
possibly. Now, there are people, developers, that want to press on even if they get a negative on a rezoning, and that does happen. It's not unheard of. Generally, if you get a negative from the planning commission, the BOMA will also give it a negative vote. But there have been just a handful in years, and in other cities I've worked in where it gets a negative at planning, but then it squeaks out that extra vote. Because here there's 5 on the BOMA, so a 3-2, if they can get 3 yeses, then that will pass it, pass the rezoning.
So planning commission's kind of like that, the front gate, so to speak, of, we're the ones who said everything's been met, all the requirements are met, and we think this is going to be a benefit to the city. Yeah,
and then there's other, it's like these companies, because sometimes it's not just one developer, it's a larger company, but they all have different personalities, because we've worked with companies that are like, well, okay, we got a negative, but maybe the vote was like 5-2, or maybe it was 4-3, and they were like, well, we know that we had 3 people that voted for it, so we'll just take our chances and go on to the next level. And like I said, on occasion it'll work out, but I would say upwards of 90% of the time, if it's a negative recommendation out of this body, it turns out to be negative. But yeah, now site plans and plats for new houses or new subdivisions, those don't go to the next level. They're all decided here. So they can vote I'll just use, for an example, the BJ's. That did not have to go to BOMA. The BJ's site plan was submitted to planning, and then, of course, staff, engineering, planning, and utilities, we all review it, and then we send it to the Planning Commission, and then they went through the process. So if it's not involving rezoning, then the Planning Commission does make the final decision.
Okay, so anything rezoning, that goes to the board,
There
but
you go.
anything else pretty much stays within
Stays
the
here,
PC.
yeah.
Okay.
So they do decide on a lot of things, yeah.
I know right now one of your biggest projects that you've been working on for quite a long time, and I have a feeling you know what it's going to be, is the zoning ordinance. So, because we're updating our zoning ordinance. So tell me how the Planning Commission is involved in that project.
Okay, so the Planning Commission, one of their normal duties, whether we were redoing zoning or not, is to make recommendations on the zoning ordinance, either the current one or, in this case, the future one. So they make a lot of recommendations, work with staff. They call us and they meet with us, and we talk about virtually all aspects of the city that come up in the zoning ordinance. And so they take those recommendations, and then we look them over, and sometimes if it's a simple recommendation like, I think we should increase our sidewalk widths, then that, maybe that's just passed on to us, and then we incorporate it into the ordinance. But, if it's maybe talking about, what are we going to do with the architectural requirements, or what are we going to do with landscaping requirements? For instance, there's always been a separation that has to happen between a new industrial, like distribution center, and say a street that's been there for 20 years, right? So there's always been, they have to do extra landscaping, they have to put in a buffer, they can't move the building too close. Well, of course, we've had a consultant to help us with it, and so when the consultants wrote certain parts of that ordinance, they brought in, of course, their experiences and what they've seen work in places that they've worked in the past. So one thing that got in there into the new version, or I'll call it a draft since it's not adopted, just the draft version, was basically a 300-foot separation between the corner of any industrial building. So if Amazon built on a lot, there'd have to be 300 feet between their wall and the next property line that's residential. And the old ordinance was much less than 300. So one of the members on the Planning Commission was reading that part and caught that, and they were like, that's a lot. So we started looking at that, and it is a lot because they're basically, I know I'm using Amazon, but it could be a lot smaller company. If they found a site to build and now they've got 300 feet, that they're basically having to say, okay, I'm just going to donate this 300 not to the city on paper, but you're donating it to landscaping and landscape buffer and trees. So we worked on that one to find a better number. But we know nothing is not good, and we know 300 is a lot. So we're in that 100 to 200 range.
Where's that middle ground?
Yeah. So that was an example.
The Planning Commission really helps set the tone for how they want to see the city coming together in the new zoning ordinance.
Yes. I guess some of them would say vision, their vision for the city.
Vision.
Yeah. They definitely are helping the city in the future with this new ordinance, and they're also using the ordinance to sort of meet their wishes or what they want the future of Laverne to look like. So the ordinance is the tool to do that.
Is there anything else about the Planning Commission that's just super interesting that you think would be
Oh, wow.
good to talk about? Or
I can say this. I don't know that it's super interesting, but the state does require education for every planning commissioner, and it's on an annual basis. So every planning...
so continuing education.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and the state's required that for many years, but each sitting member of the planning commission has to have a minimum of 4 hours of training every year. and it can be on a lot of different topics. We're already in the planning stages because we like to do it in February, and the Planning Commission likes the wintertime. So ours will be the end of February, February 24th. It's a Saturday, and we always do them Saturdays. But yeah, so that
staff puts on that training for our.
We
planning
generally
commission.
do. Yeah, so the city attorney will come and or someone from the city attorney's office. So we'll have an attorney there to go over a lot of the legalities and legal questions and things that come up. And that's generally, for that 4 hours, that generally takes an hour or longer, just the legal aspect. So, yeah, staff does, our office helps put it on, and then Gary Light in the engineering office and the city attorney. And this year, Alex Thompson is set to give a stormwater presentation. So, yeah, we kind of all together put the training on. So that's sort of something that the public may not know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That keeps our commissioners?
Yeah, planning commissioners.
That puts our planning commissioners in it. That sets them up for, yeah.
I call them commissioners sometimes. I'm like, did I say that right?
I don't think it's commissioners. Well, that's good. That puts our planning commissioners sets them up for success. Is what I'm trying to get out of
That's good. It's true.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. We've been talking with City Planner Bo Logan. For more information on the Planning Commission or the Planning Department, visit lavernetn.gov. Until next time, I'm Anne Smith. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.